Hey, good
Hello,
morning, good
hello.
afternoon. Welcome to MSP Community Live. Behind the scenes backstage, we found out that Ray is having a power outage, which is just so apt for us. Um, the two of us can never, ever, ever do any kind of video event, recording, meetup, whatever. It's some kind of curse. So, Josh, welcome as always. By the way, Josh is not the Ray stand-in. He's a real part of the show at this point. So, how's it going, man? Are you feeling better? Most
I'm feeling,
importantly,
I'm feeling fantastic. I think the sick bay edition is over. Thankfully, you sound better as well. So we should have a better show that is less taxing on our vocal cords this week.
if anyone wasn't watching last week we dubbed a sick bay edition because both Josh and I were sick at the same time, and in addition to us just sounding stuffed up and nasally and congested, we were running out of gas by the end. There were not a lot of hot takes or really engaging, insightful commentary by the end of that. I think after that show, we just went and collapsed each. So I'm hoping for a better, more informative show this time around. It has to be almost. It
Yeah,
can't be worse.
yeah. The bar has been set, so hopefully it's low enough where we can jump over it here. Uh,
So no sports to talk. Although I do think we should make some kind of MSP channel sports show. But at least in my world, Mets Jets, nothing exciting going on. The Jets are almost you can all just kind of forget about them at this point. I've reached the point of indifference. Anything with you?
well, the Panthers had the greatest week in football, their bye week. So we're good there. Although we've won 2 in a row, and now we're facing the Chiefs, who are on their first loss. So it's the ultimate trap game, and I'm pretty sure that most of the world is now a Panthers fan this week, just
No
because
kidding.
to see the
Right,
Chiefs
the
lose.
Chiefs are
So
looking to rebound after that Bills
uh,
game.
it's probably going to be very bad. I'm not my hopes are high. So that's about it for sports on my end. And I was talking to my neighbor who we go over, and that's where we watch football every Sunday. And his team, he's a 49ers fan, and they just can't put things together this year. I mean, they have the personnel, but it's just not clicking. And they're playing the Packers, who are doing pretty good this year. So he looked at me. We were over there Wednesday, and he's like, it's going to be a bad weekend for football. And I was like, well, you know what that means? That means we need to make it a good weekend of food. And because we
There you
take turns
go.
cooking, and we usually get a little extravagant. So we're coming up with some idea to, at least have a good weekend, of, even though our teams might not.
There you go. All right. All right. Well, I know I keep saying I want to make some kind of community sports show, but we'll not do that during this episode. So let's get to the MSP community stories for today. So what do we have first?
First up, we have how should MSPs price onboarding without scaring away small businesses? So,
Oh, this is such a good one.
yeah. Hi, all. I manage the sales department for a 25 to 30 employee MSP, and I noticed our onboarding costs, specifically the hours estimated for work, are getting out of hand. They used to charge around 20 to 30 labor hours for onboarding a small 20 user business. However, today he reviewed a design with our project manager, who's been with us for 3 years, and his estimate for onboarding a 24 user business with simple IT environment was 81 hours. The breakdown also includes things like client communication, contingency hours, MSP transfer com hours, all billed at our standard $150 rate. In addition, we obviously have a ton of documentation, security tools, and software installed on the configuration. MSP owners and sales pros, what do you think about this pricing? How should we price onboarding projects to balance the importance? I find it hard to justify presenting a $12,000 onboarding quote to a small business that have never worked for an MSP before. And I agree. That seems rather high. So I'll take the first stab at this one. Everything they're saying is we used to charge about 20 to 30, but how many clients have you onboarded? You have the historical data. I mean, if we think about this from a business, again, the thing that you sell, your good is your labor services. So you have historical data to look back and see how long it takes you to onboard. So there shouldn't be a guess like, oh yeah, 20, 30 hours. Like, you have that data. You know what your typical onboarding looks like, and you should be able to utilize that data to price accordingly. I mean, it's figuring out your COGS, your cost of goods. We shouldn't. I don't know. 81 hours seems pretty pretty high to me. Especially again when you have the historical data. Has it taken you 81 hours before? And if so, is that how long it takes, or maybe is there some internal efficiencies that we can knock down? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, I could talk for the whole hour on this topic. So let me address just the hours estimate portion so far. I actually could see it taking that long, depending on exactly what your onboarding team is doing, right? Documentation, fact gathering, tool implementation, backup setup, all that kind of stuff, combined with the on-sites and meetings and such, because that all takes time as well. That can add up to 81 hours. What we ended up doing just for the estimate part during onboardings was there was a formula to figure out for onboardings based on services purchased, if there are any optional add-ons, and number of users and endpoints. And it was all baked into a spreadsheet, and you put it all in, and this is about what the onboarding came out to. And it became relatively accurate after doing a lot of onboarding. So the 81 hours could be that could make sense. The pricing thing, though, I'll let you answer that first, because I will go on a long monologue about how to price onboarding. So before I get carried away here, let's just hear your thoughts on it too, so I don't monopolize the floor.
I mean, well, I think it goes back to figuring out your COGS. Like, how long does it take you to do? And once you have that information, then apply your hourly rate to it in a project. Onboarding should be a project because it is a project. It's not. It's not like your daily, your what would be included in like your normal managed services contractor, because there are things that go into it. We treat all of our onboarding and our offboardings as a project. So our project manager is involved assigning our project team to do these certain tasks. And then each person has a responsibility within our organization. And I was just actually trying now to look at, we've had a couple of recent onboardings to see how many hours they were, but I couldn't find it quick enough. But in any case, I mean, that would be my answer. I know some people do like, oh, we just charge double that first MRR, but what if that's not the right? What if you're eating money on that? What if it's too much? Like, you have the information, man. Like, you utilize it. Like, it's not this magical. It shouldn't be this just estimate or magical thing. Like, again, you have the historical data. Look to see what that is and figure it out. And to your point too, like, you have the estimation, the calculator, and I'm sure you didn't just sit there and make that up the first one. You used data from your previous onboardings to create a baseline and kind of pull this lever and this equals this, just based off of previous onboardings to go off of, I would assume, right?
Yes.
So I mean, there's the answer. Don't just, and this goes for anything. Don't just say, oh, well, the market rate is this, so I need to charge this, or like, it's your business. You have the information. Figure out your cost of goods, add in the margin that you want, and that's what your price should be. Like, it shouldn't just be what someone on the internet tells you it should be.
So I think there are two very different angles on this that the poster is thinking are the same thing. And that's where this is historically where onboarding has been a point of contention. And I went through this fight when I was running projects. The difference is the time and labor and accounting for the utilization of your projects team. Excuse me. Especially when your professional services team is as a separate P&L from your managed services, like a lot of MSPs are. There's getting that right and making sure that if I, as the pro services manager, am dedicating a couple of my guys to do the entire onboarding and hand off a clean environment to managed services for continuing support, do I take a hit P&L wise for their time, right? We have to get that part right. That's not necessarily the same thing as pricing the onboarding, though.
Yep.
Right? To OP's point, If you go to a 25-person office and give them a 15 to 20K onboarding quote, you are in deep trouble and it's killed sales. So this is largely also an internal accounting issue to make sure that your pro services team can deal with that, get credit so that their utilization and their own numbers don't get messed up, but also so that your sales team has a fair chance to close the deal. And then you deal with, okay, how do we deal with this over time, or where does the discount come from that sales is providing for the onboarding to close the deal? That I think that's really what they're asking here. And I would agree many times. In fact, almost every time I presented a quote for the actual full cost of onboarding, you just torpedoed the whole deal.
Yeah.
And so for you, the MSP, you have to figure out at what point that you will actually make the sale and work with your accounting and finance people to make sure that internally the P&L of your projects team doesn't get messed up from that.
Well, yeah,
And
at that point,
recognizing that despite yes, you have separate P&L for the department, but ultimately it's the same company. Like, take that into account as well. But what you don't want is your pro services manager, director, whatever his title is or her title, to say, well, I don't want to spend lots and lots of time for my guys to do this because we're getting just totally shafted on the basically giving away free work, which is what can happen sometimes.
Well, in that point too, it just becomes like not only you're scaring away the business, but how many months with that client are you going to operate at a loss before you generate a profit? So you're looking at two different things. Like, well, clearly they're going to be scared of a $12,000 onboarding bill. So like if you have to lower it to $6K, how many months is it going to take for you to actually become profitable with that company? And is that sustainable? And if the answer is no, then maybe your ideal client isn't a 25-man shop, and you need to look at bigger, larger, more mature clients. Then
Could be. I mean, I would argue you still need to treat it as two separate things. Pricing the onboarding is not the same as getting the accounting right. And I think that's if I'm making one point in this whole story, it's that sales needs a price that they can sell and close the deal to the client. Your professional services and projects department needs to be able to use their best guys for onboarding and not get totally crushed on their numbers at the end of the month because of it. And they're separate things.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's go ahead and mosey on over to the next story here, which doesn't involve onboarding of projects teams. We have about MSP impersonation. Hello, fellow MSPs. Our MSP, which serves the hospitality industry, has recently been targeted by phone scammers pretending to be our IT support team. They're calling our customers and tricking staff into performing sensitive actions like voiding transactions and refunds. What strategies have you used to prevent these types of scams and protect the clients? Thank you. Well, to me, this is the easiest one that should be employed. Is you should be doing like the verification. There's multiple tools out there, ways to do it, but there should be some sort of two-way verification to where if a client calls you, they're giving you a code or whatever that verification may be before you're doing anything for them. And then likewise, if you're calling them, you're training your clients on, hey, we're going to provide, hey, we need the authentication code before we do anything. I mean, that should be happening because has anyone, has this person not heard of the MGM hack? I mean, that could have been prevented using those sort of tools.
So yeah, I would agree with that. With one, I'm not going to disagree, but I am going to point out that it's very easy for us to say for the other direction here, like when someone is calling from the MSP to the user. Users don't necessarily remember that there's a security protocol in place, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of I don't want to say lazy, but it's kind of easy for us to say up here, yeah, of course, bidirectional, stuff, and it's a lot harder to actually do in practice. The idea of having a support pin that the end user needs when they're calling the MSP, much easier to deal with, right? You store it in the PSA, and you have a limited set of employees that you can train to have to do that. It's harder to say, hey, end users, you can't, there's no enforcement mechanism on that, right? If I'm outside, like, yeah, okay, we can establish the support pin, but that's not going to make somebody actually do it.
I mean, it
So
comes
what's
down
the
to the
strategy there?
I mean, it comes down to education and communication. When we rolled out that our identification, we made it very clear to the clients to hopefully pass along to their employees. And obviously, we don't have control over it, but we said, "Hey, challenge us too. When we're calling you, we expect you to ask for the pin, and we're going to provide the
Mhm.
pin for what that is because of this." And we went to go and as much as say like when we partner with our clients, I mean we are every step of the way a partner. I mean we go to their events, we celebrate them, we promote them on our media platforms, and for better or for worse, it's pretty easy to figure out who some of our clients are. It doesn't take long, and
Yeah,
it would be
right.
pretty easy for threat actors to go ahead and do what this person's doing. So it just really comes down to education and communication. But unfortunately, you are right. I mean, there's only so much we can do. There's no technical enforcing of that. And we have to get it right every time. And the threat actor just has to get that one employee who might not have gotten the menu, who or memo, or who just might be like, just they want to get their stuff done. And there's the compromise.
Yeah. So I think nail on head, right? It is an education thing. So that's about the best we can do. I'm just pointing out and kind of, being devil's advocate here. Um, it's we on the show, or we in the security industry, or any of us can just say things like, yeah, take a risk-based approach, ensure you have a bi-directional. Some of this stuff is easier said than done, and I think we just need to be good at acknowledging that fact.
Yeah. I would also be interested to see like what exactly are they like impersonating? Like, is it just a phone saying, "Hey, we're the IT support team"? Like, is there some sort of like domain squatting or anything that they've done? Like, and there's various strategies to deal with that. But really, I mean, truthfully, the really only thing you can do is that bidirectional identity and user education and training.
Yes.
And I mean, that's what comes down to a lot of security is user education and training. And that's why security awareness training is so important, because we can have every security control in place. We can have every policy in place. And all it takes is for one person to click the wrong link, or to answer the wrong phone and let someone in. And all of their stuff now that we try to prevent it is useless. And at that point, the best thing we can do is hopefully able to recover and respond as quickly as possible to the incident. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I mean, we have very secure environments. It's not going to prevent everything. So the other things we can do is, again, when boom happens, so the event happens, is limit the blast radius and respond and recover as quickly as possible.
So let's drill down into what is the threat actor doing? I think you raise a good point. I want to make sure we don't skip over that. If I'm calling some client, right? I find your client list, call up the CEO or call up the IT manager, or that power user, whoever. Um, what would I actually do, right? Presumably these guys don't have local admin rights to their own machines, so it's not like I can install my RMM software. Hopefully there's a training aspect in that. Don't you already have remote access? Why are you asking me to download and install some,
Mhm.
whatever remote control tool? Maybe that's part of the education, right? You ever get those text messages that say, bank will never ask you for this pin, right? Stuff like that. Maybe there's an aspect of that we can be doing as well. Like, we will never call you asking to install something. We'll
Yeah.
always, do that for you, or something like that. That could be part of it too, right? It's not just, hey, warning people might call, having to impersonate. Maybe the scope of what actions you might take that are initiated with a
Yeah.
phone call could be part of it as well.
Well, in the thing it says like voiding transactions and refunds. So what I'm make an assumption, or just at least a guess on, is maybe they're trying to say, hey, um, we're sorry, we didn't mean to charge that. So like a refund, and then some fraudulent bank account to intercept traffic or something. That's a pretty common one, trying
Yeah.
to get the wire fraud or some sort of money. So again, but then it still goes
Yeah.
back
Weird
into
to hear that as
education.
an MSP
Like,
impersonation. Huh? Yeah. I think we need
yeah,
more info.
yeah. I'd be interested to kind of see more of this. The other thing too, we didn't bring up, contact IC3. I mean, get get as much information as you can and file a complaint to the Internet Crime Center. They do take those seriously and could potentially help shut it down. I mean, if you get phone numbers, I mean, yeah, they're hard to track, but at that point, like if you don't report it, nothing can happen. There's not going to be anything bad that's going to happen from reporting it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Certainly in the aggregate or in the long term, that can help. Not particularly useful in the immediate moment, but there's absolutely no reason not to do that.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we covered this one. So yeah, let's. I'll let you go.
I've soapboxed it to death. I made my point.
All right, your turn. Handle. What's the next one?
I was gonna say thank you for bringing it to the center of the screen because it was squiggle before. Oh, everyone's favorite topic. How do you handle on-call? This is a totally non-controversial topic, depending on who and where you are in the organization. My MSP has a manual process that failed recently, causing chaos in the early morning hours. Process is our after-hours answering service, calls an extra iPhone, unless you're using Android. If only they use BlackBerry, that would solve the problem. Extra iPhone the manager has on hand, and he configures call forwarding every week to a different technician. Manager took vacation and chaos. Interesting. What do other MSPs do? Okay, that first answer is a little, it sounds good and it gets upvotes. It kind of misses the point though. Like nobody promises 24 hours. Every MSP I've ever seen in the entire world has a way to page the on-call engineer. So that's a little dismissive and not really helpful as a response, despite the upvotes.
I can tell you what the first ever MSP that I worked for did, and it's the what not to do. What not to do was we had so it was pretty smaller. We had a web department and a MSP department, and the MSP department was the owner who was decently technical but wanted to get more hands off. There was 2 senior engineers who did all the server work, networking work, and then there was me, the kind of lowly junior sysadmin who did all the grunt work. And of course, because I'm the new guy on the totem pole, I'm the one who's always on call, no matter what. Even though there's probably not much I can do when they call. And then when that employee has a second kid and the daycare is more than their mortgage payment, and the wife has to stay at home, and then I need to get a second job in order to pay my bills, and let them know at this point we have 6 employees now that, hey, I can't be the 24/7 on call anymore because I need to pay my bills. So I either need a raise or I need a second job. And then that wasn't good enough, and I was told that I need to find a new job because they need me to do that. So that's what
that's not the right way to do
it. That's not what to do. The right thing to do, we use this thing called PagerDuty, and we have an on-call rotation. And I don't know the ins and outs of it because it's not my department, but I'm fairly certain that there's like a base, like, hey, if you're on call, there's an extra pay scale or whatever with that. And we have 1 technician and 1 escalation that's on call. And if really something hits the bed, I mean, we have communication to where we have like our project engineers or myself who can be reached. But, we're technically always on call, but not like working a shift, right? So we have it documented. It's scheduled well enough in advance. So if people need to make arrangements, that they do. I think that's kind of I feel that's the right way to do it if you're going to have on call.
Yeah, that's very similar to what we did. So we had 1 person who was on call, rotated in 1-week shifts. I was not part of the on-call answer the phone rotation just because I was always around for escalations if needed. That was like the agreement we all worked out. The way we handled it from a routing and ops perspective, which sounded like the original question, like the call just didn't get to the person because of that second iPhone thing, is after hours, our AVR would switch to something like, if you have, if this is a priority ticket or emergency ticket, I think it was 4 or 1, whatever the option was, press this option to page the on-call engineer. And that kicked off a workflow that did a couple of things. One was sent the voicemail to a different email address that kicked off a workflow in our PSA to create a ticket at higher priority, and also sent an email to an SMS gateway that would send to a DL or something like that went to the person's actual cell phone for paging the on-call person. So there's a number of ways you can do that from a call flow perspective, but I think the big thing is that sending it, the days of having like a separate physical on-call phone, I think are over most likely, and that's probably where the process broke down. I would suggest using some kind of call routing feature or PSA workflow or something like that to page the on-call person. I know you get into, depending on the environment, like I don't want to use my personal phone for this stuff and whatever, you might have to deal with that. We, for better or worse, kind of didn't care about that. I was like, yeah, just put in my real cell number. It's fine. You may have to deal with that depending on the environment, but keep it within the same context of like whatever you're using for call routing and your phone system, do it through there somehow. And that'll avoid this issue of, somebody was out of the office and the phone went to Hawaii with them.
Yeah, that definitely agree with that. And that's pretty much like, I know we said we had like one tech, one escalation, but with the pager duty, there is there is a whole process that gets kicked off, sends email, sends text. I don't know how it's fully configured, but yes, having that business process to where it's not just forwarding to a personal cell phone, taking time to build out. And these are, this instance right here is a perfect example of lessons learned. Like, hey, it happened, it sucked. Something probably bad happened. Client was upset, or internally the process broke down. It was upset. It happens. It's growing pains. So, to learn from it, and hey, like this happened. How can we prevent it from happening again? And that's how you would do it. Fix the business process.
So let me pose a question to you, since you're on the subject of on-call, and this comes up every single time we discuss on-call with someone. Let's say you implement the process like we just talked about, right? You can hit, 911 or star or whatever to page the on-call person. What's the conversation, or how do you deal with clients that start doing that when I can't use this printer and there's one right next to it that I can use starts coming up? Like, how do you deal with clients that are abusing the on-call system that way, or using it as a way to cut the line? How do you avoid that?
Man, that's a good question. From my experience as well, trying to create workarounds until like and again, this isn't my part. So, but I believe that our after hours it's not like it is a separate thing. So if you're utilizing them, it's costing more. So the whole idea is, hey, let's get you back up and running as quickly as possible. And it's like, is there a workaround that we can do? Is there a temp fix? And then when it's business hours, that we can look in and actually fix the root cause of it. So I think I guess that's how I would handle it, is
I like the comment.
Instead of fixing that, just, hey, let's plug your other printer in, and then we can get you a more temporary fix and document that as it goes forward.
Yeah, and there's not necessarily a universally right answer to this. I've seen things like, if you put in an emergency ticket, it's like a minimum 2-hour charge at time and a half rate or something like that. That doesn't always go well though when there are emergencies. Or I've seen companies do things like, if we deem it to be frivolous, we'll bill you for it. Nobody ever ends up billing for it though, like that, because it just leads to a fight. Or, do you take the approach that if you have clients doing that, they're not a good fit in the first place? I've seen that too. So just curious. There may not be a solid answer or a universal answer to how to avoid that. And frankly, we didn't really have too much of a problem with it. We did occasionally, and we ended up just having to have a conversation with the with the client, it turned into a client who cried wolf kind of situation.
Yeah, it becomes less of a tech problem, more of a business problem at that point. Reaching out to your POC and saying, "Hey, this employee is abusing the on call, and let's work together and figure out how we can stop it."
Yeah, agreed. Okay, what is our next story? We can move on before I start talking about on call war stories.
Well, this one here, we have getting techs oriented to customers. So they're medium sized at MSP. In our office, we have 5 techs, 1.5 cybersecurity guys, and 1.5 engineers. The office has about 50 customers, ranging from 1 to 1,000 users, full mixed MSP co-managed. Infrastructures varied. He's hoping for input on how your shops keep techs new and old oriented to all varying customers with their stacks and oddities. They already use Hoodoo for documentation. So if a tech gets a call, pulls up that customer's company, then searches for what they need. O365 login to reset a password. Hey, I mean, use SIP. Come on. Search for a line of business app to see what server it's hosted on, users access it, how to KP, one asset for application, etc. But for a new tech or an old tech who hasn't worked for a customer for a while, the overall setup of that customer tends to be enigmatic unless they know from experience. So if one customer is one passwordless AAD only customer, and then some of them are hybrid synced and gets a call, a lot of the times it ends up messaging with a company asking for information on this or that. So how do you fix that?
I'm laughing because this is describing the way that my organization was in the first couple of years of its existence, right? At the very beginning, there were, I've talked about this before. People would say, oh, that's a Mac client. They're set up this way, or that's a Mike client.
Yep.
They're set up that way, right? And man, if there's ever been exhibit A of why standardization across clients is important, just print this out and like frame it or like email it to someone. This is why it's important to set things up the same across clients. And that idea of having boutique perfect solutions for every single thing, as much as we like the concept as engineers, just doesn't really make it, right? It just doesn't work. It doesn't scale. And what happens is you, the person who set up this extremely elegant solution, are now stuck supporting that client personally for the rest of eternity. Right, that's the downside. So I'll let you elaborate on that, Josh. But I think we're both in agreement that this entire thing is just they don't have standard architectures across their clients, and that's why it's a problem.
Yeah, but even so, I'll push back on that a little. Is we also have standard processes, but when we onboard a client, they're not, maybe they don't have our networking gear, networking stack. So we do have to at least be proficient a little bit in a different firewall than our just normal stack. And then when it comes time to renew, we'll get them on our firewall. But I think it really comes down to, like, it appears that they have some documentation, but how good is that documentation? Is there kind of anything missing? Or just kind of, I guess, general training. I mean, I'm not really doing hands-on tickets, but there are times where I have to hop in client environments, and I might, especially now, like, hey, I haven't touched this client in months, but just knowing where to look for, like, if there's a business email compromise I'm responding to, like, I don't know if they're 80 synced or 365 off the top of my head. So just knowing, hey, this is where I go look for that. But we also have very, very strict client documentation for all of our clients. I mean, there is construction diagram for thing. Yes, is really. So getting that is, we're lucky enough to have, like, talent managers where if it's out something I do need something, I can ask them. I think really two things: the best you can, and aligning to some sort of standard. But standard, you're still going to have some clients who might be Entry ID hybrid versus cloud only versus on-prem. It's not really like a standard way to do that. So you kind of just know, and sometimes there's not for everything. It's just knowledge that you pick up over time.
So I think there's degrees of standard standardization to this. And what I mean by that is, yes, you might have somebody on Entra ID or hybrid or like legit hybrid or whatever, right? You have all these different ways to do identity, for example. But all of your Entra ID setups the same, right? If somebody has a synced on-prem to cloud, is that all set up the same way, or is it maybe it's set up to run every 1 hour here, like every other day,
Yeah.
So I do agree that yes, you might have somebody with different setup. Maybe somebody has moved over to completely SAML based and somebody hasn't because they have on-prem legacy apps or stuff like that. Yes, of course. But your documentation should ideally be at a point where you say, okay, they're on-prem, they're cloud, and you know that with a relatively high degree of certainty that all of your cloud identity customers are set up roughly the same way. All of your on-prem identity customers are set up roughly the same way. And you hopefully you don't have techs looking for documentation that says, hey, this is an on-prem, their OU structure is like totally different from everyone else because XYZ.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that it is worth it, especially those implementation details that the client doesn't care about, right? The client doesn't care about what their containers and OUs look like. Part of standardization, though, is getting that stuff up to some kind of company standard, in addition to just the technologies. And yeah, there's debates about stuff like, do you rip out the firewall day one? Do you all that stuff? Various organizations do it differently, but if you have firewall vendor A, whatever vendor that is, I would assume that your process for setting up some kind of port forwarding or setting up a VPN configuration is the same across all the deployments of that firewall. It should be at least.
Yeah, it agreed. We do have standard hardening processes for firewall tenants, AD, things like that. So.
Right, and I think that was a good chunk of my original point. Like if I hire a tech, yes, you might have to go to the documentation and look. Hey, they have a SonicWall versus a Fortinet, right? Whatever vendor you're using, but it shouldn't necessarily have to be. Oh, I'm at one of Matt's clients, so the VPN uses a weird subnet because he always sets things up with sub interfaces instead of whatever, right? All of that stuff. Should be more or less universal across your client base.
Yep. Nope. Definitely agree with that. So the more then you only have your this is the way. This is the things to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead and get to this next one here. This is one that I got a soapbox ready for. This person posts, how much does a SOC 2 really cost? Looking for advice. One of our clients asked us to get a SOC 2 Type 2 report, and we need to prioritize it now. This has been on the radar, but I'm not sure where to start. We've worked with clients who already have the reports, so I understand the general process. But since we don't have a report ourselves, I could use to expect for costs. Do you have any recommendations for compliance readiness platforms? So this definitely sounds like, hey, I need SOC 2 Type 2 next month. And that's not how it works. Same thing where you get a client who calls up like, oh, I need to be NIST certified or I need to be HIPAA certified and I need that certification in 2 months. Like, cool. Not how that happens. So
go ahead and soapbox this. I think we would say very similar things, and it sounds like you have it primed. So go for
it. The first thing that comes to mind is not so much a pushback, but asking, why are you requesting this? Do you understand what you're asking for? Because especially when it comes to SOC 2 reports, they can be scoped to a completely narrow subset to where if you're actually looking at the report and looking at the documentation, it can so strictly be scoped that effectively it doesn't mean a damn thing. So what are you actually asking for? What outside throwing the report aside, what is the point of you asking for this? Are you looking for specific security documentation? Are you looking for some sort of third-party attestation? Are you looking to see if they have certain policies, procedures, controls in place? one thing that I would want to bring up, and I feel that is a little bit stronger, especially on the MSP side, rather than a SOC 2 Type 2, is something like the CompTIA Trustmark, what they're doing. A third-party attestation that covers specific MSP things versus your SOC 2 is pretty broad. And with the Trustmark, you can't scope it. Like it is your entire MSP versus your SOC 2 also being scoped. Additionally, a SOC 2 isn't a pass fail. It is an attestation. They'll look at it and they'll basically say, all right, this is the things that are roadmapped and this is that you're working on. So it's not really like you can't fail a SOC 2. They come in, they look at things depending on the scope, and then you have the report. So that's my soapbox. You most likely don't need a SOC 2.
Yeah. So for anything that's not mandatory, right? And by mandatory, I mean if you're subject to PCI or if you're a publicly traded company and subject to SOX or like any of that stuff, the certification is worth it only to the degree that you are going to win or lose business based on having it or not. So we'll say for a second, let's just go under the assumption that some prospect or some customer said, in order for you to sign, in order for us to sign the agreement, we need you to have a SOC 2. So we'll just assume that for the sake of answering the question. And I agree with your points about it being a little weird to apply to an MSP, although I did go through it for the MSP I came from, and it was a little strange scoping it. As far as how much should it cost and what does the process look like, the actual audit, I don't even want to throw numbers, but it'll be less than, I don't know, less than 25,000 most likely, at least at the time. Could be more, could be less, depending on size, scope, and a lot of other things. But the big cost is the effort to get your processes up to a point that you're ready to be audited. And what I mean by that is with all regulatory compliance, or at least many of them, it's not just, do you have MDR in place? Do you have data backup in place? Do you have all this stuff in place? It's, can I, as an auditor, say, show me the monthly backup test that your policy says you do once every first of the month. Let me show me the April 1st one, right? Do you have all that down? That's where the big effort and cost comes from. The stuff that you say you're doing and providing real evidence for. One, in just it's going to be a lot of extra work for someone if you're not doing anything like that yet. But two, in that if you have to get this stuff all off the ground, that's going to be somebody's job for the better part of, even sometimes up to a year in some cases. And the other thing is, if you're going type 2, you literally can't do type 2 until you've had some time to be able to provide this evidence, right? So in case anyone's not familiar, type 1 is asking, do the controls that you've described satisfy the criteria for the SOC 2 items, right? Do they match, right? In the auditor's opinion, if you implement these, have you met what they're looking for? Yep. And then in type 2, it's, are you actually doing it and can you prove it? And so you literally can't do type 2 in a month. Even if you were perfect, you can't do type 2 in a month.
Yep. I mean, that really goes in. I mean, that was one of the first things I did coming to the organization, is just aligning to the CIS controls. And that involved kind of me going through and providing the documentation. And it really was, I mean, that was like my job, not all the time, but I would say a good solid, like 10 hours a week. If not more, was my time spent gathering the evidences. And it's worth it, because when we went to go do the Trustmark, like, I was like, cool, we have most of this stuff documented. There's things specifically. One of our clients currently is going through another assessment, and we as the MSP are being assessed. And they handed us a 50-page questionnaire saying, do you guys do this? And can you support the evidence? And I was like, perfect. Like, we have this stuff documented and we've already went through this. So I know where to look. So it is a lot of work up front. But again, if you're aligning to a framework and you're doing those sort of things, so like, I mean, just picking CIS, for example, if you're aligning to that and then you have a specific thing like a SOC 2 or a trust mark or NIST, whatever, like there's a lot of like, we are already doing this. So here's the evidence and the proof of that. And that's something I think we should be doing anyway. If you like, it's one of those things you never have the time, and all of a sudden, oh crap, well now we need this, and now you're scrambling and not really realizing like how much actual time and effort, and you can't just put it on one person. I mean, it's a team, it's a team thing, because one person shouldn't have all the answers and probably doesn't, unless you're obviously a smaller organization or a one-man type shop. But there's not a magic tool. Even if you get a SaaS application or something to help you, you still have to put in the work. It's the same thing with writing the policies. We work hand in hand with our client to make various policies, IR plans, BCP, things like that. And yeah, I can hold their hand and I can provide the template, but the majority of the time is me sitting down with the client and making them answer the questions. And there's no getting around that. There's no magic solution. There's no SaaS application. You have to sit down and fill it out and answer the questions and make sure that you have the procedures in place and are being followed.
Oh, I thought for policies, all you had to do was download a policy bundle and change that variable at the top where it's a company name and put it away on the bookshelf and not do anything else, and you're good to go.
I mean, no, it's ChatGPT now. You don't even download it. You just ask it to make you one. Come on.
Yes. You don't even have to go find like the old SANS documents and things like that that you used to use.
And then you don't even have to change out my company. It'll do it for you, man. AI.
Yeah. So I agree. I think we're saying the same thing, right? There's the direct cost of paying an auditor. There's obviously significant internal effort to going through this, but there's a way bigger conversation of, is this even appropriate to be going through? Why does your client want it? Okay, we're not totally cured yet, sick-wise. And just, is this the right thing? There's a fantastic slide that CJ from CompTIA likes to share. I wish I had a copy of it now. That shows Trustmark gets 70-80% of some other frameworks, depending on what you're crosswalking against. It's really pretty incredible how close you can get to some other things, and of course it's obviously tailored for MSP things as opposed to SOC 2, which does apply to MSPs, but largely a lot of it is on like SaaS software vendors. That's where it's a little more appropriate for.
100%. That is yes, and that's what I would say if someone asked us for one. It's like it's not what you're looking for. So, all right, well, we have a little bit left. Do we want to get to our last one really quick? Could be fun.
Sure.
What really do you do quick, right? Yeah. What do you do when a customer's being rude? Simple, Matt. What do you do?
I don't like that this is the answer, but let's just talk about the reality of it. Yes, you can. You just don't take it, right? Like I have told my guys to get off the phone, hang up on them. I don't care if it's the CEO of our biggest client. If they're being rude, get off the phone with them, transfer it to somebody else. Like, just don't engage and involve manager, CEO, anyone else at the company who does have the authority to speak on behalf of the organization. Like, that's kind of it.
I mean, okay, well, all right, Matt, you're the manager now. You have a customer being rude to you. You can't escalate it anymore. You're the MSP owner. You're the manager. Now what?
I mean, so the way we handled this is it's a frank conversation. You're going to treat my staff and admins with respect, or you won't be clients anymore. That's it. Yep. And we've thankfully only had to have that conversation one or two times, but you just can't take it. And on behalf of your employees, you need to show them that you have their backs, even if it means potentially firing a client.
100%. I mean, I used to work in a call center before my MSP days, so this was a little more of a. That's kind of one thing we train our techs on is people call the call center, and you don't have that like face to face, like it's just somebody over a phone, like so. Customers unfortunately are a little more brave with what they're able to say, and the end agents
Keyboard
would
warriors.
warn them once, and then after the second time they would drop the call, or it would escalate a manager and you'd say the same thing, like, hey, we need two-way respect here, or we can't continue doing business. I don't know if I've told this story before, but my first MSP, I did have a client try to fight me, and I didn't even get mad at it. I was such an absurd situation that I just laughed. So a super long story short, he was one of the head guys of this client, like a real estate firm, and we set him up with OneDrive, SharePoint, all that stuff, so they have a backup. And his computer was on the verge of dying, but he liked it, so he wanted to keep it, and he didn't follow the process of storing his documents on OneDrive. So inevitably the hard drive died, and along with it, all of the things that stored on his hard drive were gone. And I had to unfortunately tell him the news, like, hey, I'm sorry, but there's no backup on these. Like they weren't on the OneDrive. Like there's nothing we can do except for potentially engaging with data recovery services, which I can refer you to. And he's like, well, what did you just say? And I repeated it. And he goes, come down here and say that to my face like a man. And I was like, what? Like, like that's not gonna get your files back. And like I get he's frustrated. But like I mean, clearly, like he threatened me, as I told my boss and things like that, and they called him and said you couldn't be doing that. But like it was just such an absurd situation. Like I don't know what fighting me is gonna do to get your data back, man.
Yeah, that's just so what, how did that end?
I mean, he got scolded, and his data was gone. There's nothing more we could really do. He decided not to go with the data recovery because those services are a lot of money. And
They're
the
very
files he
expensive.
had wasn't worth potentially looking into that. So it was a long time ago. I don't remember too much I don't remember much of the aftermath, but I'll never forget what he said over the phone.
All right. Well, I think we are about out of time. As a reminder, since next week is the day after Thanksgiving, there is no show next week, which means Ray will be available and ready to go, of course, just because that's the way the curse works. So thank you for tuning in. Have a very fantastic Thanksgiving. Josh, anything that you want to remind everyone of or talk about coming up this week?
Actually, I have to get to my IR game that we're doing. We're doing on the new framework, and it's a business email compromise. So if you missed today, highly recommend you check out. We're doing one in December as well. So please go to our site, irgame.ai.
All right. Well, thank you for listening, watching, and have a very happy Thanksgiving.
This has been a broadcast of the MSP Media Network.